Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. So today is very special. It's going to be very interactive. I really want to hear from everybody. We did a meetup on, your one favorite self-help book, and that worked out really well. But in the course of it, so this is the beautiful thing about this format. Each person brings their own way of doing things, and then I try to learn from that and try to make it more universal, make it more accessible. So one of the things that Dave did and Jyoti did is that they read out from the books that they liked. And especially Dave, he read out this entire story, short story, which blew everybody away. So today what we are going to do is we are going to apply that idea. So I invite everybody to talk about one of the books that has been influential in their life, that has transformed their life. Don't pick a book which you're just reading. Pick a book that has had an impact on your life, and then read from it. Choose any selections that you want and read from it, and then talk about why that book has been transformative for you. Okay. And we'll go through everybody and then we'll have a conversation. I'm going to keep track of everything. And we'll have a conversation about it. So that's the format. So it's very much very highly interactive. And folks, the simplest thing, the biggest thing that I've learned doing meetups is that the more you speak, the more you learn. You don't learn in a passive way. The more you put yourself out there, the more you speak, the more you interact, the more you get. So you listen in order to speak. So please use this opportunity to share with others what you have learned. You will also find that it has many, 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 many advantages. Firstly, speaking it out allows you to actually pinpoint what it is that you like about the book. Secondly, by sharing it with others, you're letting others know who you are a little bit more. That allows them to interact with you in breakout rooms, across all the meetups in a better way. Third, you are actually contributing something to the lives of other people. This is a book that has been transformative to you, and you're speaking about it. So you are a better champion, better way, it provides the best way in which they can actually access the book. The idea of reading from the book allows them to see whether they like the style of the thinker, of how they approach topics, not just what they are saying, but how they are thinking about it. So it's a very rich potential for dialogues, and you get to listen to all of them. And then we're going to have a conversation about that. Okay, so folks, go ahead and type ! If you would like to share. The rules remain the same. The 4 rules you have used for the past 5 years. Rule number 1, type ! in chat or raise your hand in Zoom in order to speak. Rule number 2, keep on topic. Rule number 3, be brief. This time you have up to 5 minutes to talk about your favorite book. And last, speak your mind. Feel free to disagree with anybody on anything, and do so courteously. All right, so it's going to be, Dave's are off to a great start. So it's going to be Dave from Tacoma, and then David R, and then Joe and Michael. Dave, go ahead.
David R, should we alternate paragraphs, make this fun? No, since Sri Khan was bragging on me, I thought I'd better come up with another one today. I talked about the biography of Harry Truman, and I noted Wednesday night we had a couple people also note biographies of Churchill and Benjamin Franklin. So maybe we can come up with biography day someday. But since the description still talked about self-help, I thought about my other favorite author, Robert Fulghum, that wrote All You Need to Know You Learned in Kindergarten. And a lot of you probably heard of that and maybe have even read that book. There's a series of 4 books, and they're all short stories. Of course, they're not indexed. But I was looking for a story that I thought would be very meaningful, and I couldn't find it. And the last story, I only had 2 of the books. The other 2 I don't have anymore. But I remembered and really struck me. It's about peace and music. And Shrikant, I'm glad you're giving me 5 minutes because I timed myself last night. It was 4 minutes and 50 seconds. So we'll give it a whirl here. It is the year 2050. In a large Eastern European city, one that has survived the vicissitudes of more than 1,000 years of human activity. In an open square in the city center, there is a rather odd civic monument, a bronze statue. Not a soldier or politician, not a general on a horse or a king on a throne. Instead, the figure of a somewhat common man sitting in a chair, playing his cello. Around the pedestal on which the statue sits, there are bouquets of flowers. If you count, you will always find 22 flowers in each bunch. The cellist as a national hero. If you ask to hear the story of this statue, you will be told of a time of civil war in this city. Demagogues lit bonfires of hatred between citizens who belonged to different religions and ethnic groups. Everyone became an enemy of someone else. No one was exempt or safe. Men, women, children, babies, grandparents, old and young, strong and weak, partisan and innocent, all were victims in the end. Many were maimed, many were killed. Those who did not die lived like animals in the ruins of the city. Except one man, a musician, a cellist. He came to a certain street corner every day. Dressed in formal black evening clothes, that's a tuxedo for your non-musicians. Sitting in a fire-charred chair, he played his cello. Knowing he might be shot or beaten, still he played. Day after day he came to play the most beautiful music he knew. Day after day, for 22 days. His music was stronger than hate, his courage stronger than fear. And in time, other musicians were captured by his spirit, and they took their places in the street beside him. These acts of courage were contagious. Anyone who could play an instrument or sing found a place at a street intersection somewhere in the city and made music. In time, the fighting stopped. The music and the city and the people lived on. A nice fable, a lovely story, something adults might make up to inspire children. A tale of the kind found in tourist guidebooks, explaining and embellishing the myths beyond civic statuary. A place to have your picture taken. Is there any truth in such a parable other than the implied acknowledgement of the sentimentality of myth making? The real world does not work this way. We all know that. Cellists seldom become civic heroes. Music doesn't affect wars. Vedran Samalovic does not agree. In the New York Times Magazine, July 1992, his photograph appeared. Middle-aged, longish hair, great bushy mustache. He is dressed in formal evening clothes, sitting in a cafe chair in the middle of a street, in front of a bakery, where mortar fire struck a bread line in late May, killing 22 people. He is playing his cello. As a member of the Sarajevo Opera Orchestra, there is little he can do about hate and war. It has been going on in Sarajevo for centuries. Even so, every day for 22 days, he has braved sniper and artillery fire to play Albione's profoundly moving Adagio in group G minor. I wonder if he chose this piece of music knowing it was constructed from a manuscript fragment found in the ruins of Dresden after the Second World War. By the way, we firebombed Dresden that had a university but no military target, killed more people in that night than were killed in Hiroshima. The music survived the firebombing. Perhaps that is why he played it there in the scarred streets of Sarajevo, where people died waiting in line for bread. Something must triumph over horror. Is this man crazy? Maybe. Is his gesture futile? Yes. In a conventional sense, yes, of course. But what can a cellist do? What man is to go out alone in the streets and address the world with a wooden box and a hairstring bow? What can a cellist do? All he knows how to do, speaking softly with his cello, one note at a time, like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, calling out the rats that invest the human spirit. Vedran Samalovic is a real person. What he did is true. Neither the bread line, nor the mortar shell, nor the music is fiction. For all the fairy tales, these acts do take place in the world in which we live. Sometimes history knocks at the most ordinary door to see if anyone is at home. Sometimes someone is. Most everyone in Sarajevo knows now what a cellist can do. For the place where Vedran played has become an informal shrine, a place of honor. Croats, Serbs, Muslims, Christians alike, they all know his name and face. They place flowers where he played, commemorating the hope that must never die, that someday, somehow, the best of humanity shall overcome the worst, not through unexpected miracles, but through the expected acts of the many. Sarajevo was not the only place where Vedran Samalovic is known. An artist in Seattle, Washington, saw his picture and read his story. Her name is Bele's brother, real person, real name. What can an artist do? She organized 22 cellists to play in 22 public places in Seattle for 22 days. And on the final day, all 22 played together in one place in front of a store window, displaying burned out bread pans, 22 loaves of bread, and 22 roses. People came, newspaper reporters and television cameras were there. The story and the pictures were fed into news networks of the world and passed back to Vedran Samalovic that he might know his music had been heard and passed on. Others have begun to play in many cities. In Washington, D.C., 22 cellists played at the day our new president was sworn into office. Who knows who might hear? Who knows what might happen? Millions of people saw Vedran's story in the New York Times. Millions have seen and heard the continuing story picked up by the media. Now you too know. Tell it to someone. This is urgent news. Keep it alive in the world. As for the end of the story, who among us shall insist the rest of the story cannot come true? Who shall say the monument in the park in Sarajevo will never come to pass? A cynic who lives in a dark hole in my most secret mind says, one cellist cannot stop a war, and music can ultimately only be a dirge played over the unimaginable. But somewhere in my soul, I know otherwise. Listen. Never ever regret or apologizing for believing that when one man or one woman decides to risk addressing the world with truth, the world may stop what it is doing and hear. There is too much evidence to the contrary. When we cease believing this, the music will surely stop. The myth of the impossible dream is more powerful than all the facts of history. In my imagination, I lay flowers at the statue memorializing Vedran Samalovic, a monument that has not yet been built, but may be. Meanwhile, a cellist plays in the streets of Sarajevo. Thank you for listening.
Wow. Thank you.
And I'll
Thank
put
you.
the name of the book and the cellist name in chat, and you can Google it later if you want to.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I just want to say one thing. This kind of points to the power of a moral person, a person who kind of connects to kind of the depth of what human being is like. Just before the pandemic, I visited India and I went to Ahmedabad, and there is the Gandhi ashram there of Mahatma Gandhi. And I was looking at his story. His actions were very simple. He simply said, I'm going to march. I'm going to walk from here to the ocean and pick up some salt. It's a very simple action. But these actions kind of capture a moral idea that resonates amongst people, and they kind of carried the entire nation with him. But more importantly, it touched the humanity in his quote unquote enemies and awoken the moral sense in them. So through a very simple action, like playing a cello or picking a handful of salt, these people changed the world because they connect to the deepest part of us. When people are off center, trying to deal with whatever is going on right now, and it reminds them of who we are. So that's just beautiful story. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it. Next up is going to be David, Joe, Mike, Jyoti, Donna, Deborah, and Christina. David, go ahead.
Okay, so I believe the idea is you find a book that was transformational. The interesting thing with this book that I have here is it's a Amazon AI recommendation from, I buy quite a few books on Amazon. I buy philosophy and I buy physics. And this book came up, and it's normally I don't read fiction. So I was pretty hesitant because this is obviously a fiction. But I thought, well, I read kind of the blurb, and the thing that it resonates, you use the word resonate, Shirkant, and this is the book that resonated with me. I could just read the prologue, I suppose. And it has a funny title. It's not exactly what you would say is a transcendental or, a title that perhaps is uplifting, but it's an interesting book. It really grabs you. It's a good way to get your philosophy in an action-packed novel. I don't know if that appeals to anyone, but I'll just read the prologue. It'll only take me, I think, about 3 minutes or 4 minutes, and then I'll just leave it at that, because it summarizes, well, it doesn't summarize, it gives you a taste of the philosophy that the author is trying to put across in fiction. Kingston Penitentiary, July 28th, 2012. Kingston Penitentiary, by the way, is a big prison here in Canada, in Kingston, Ontario. It's one of the biggest, oldest, I think it's like over 100 years old. Why am I in jail? You don't say to a newborn baby, you're responsible for your actions. So why am I responsible? Why are all of us held accountable for our actions? Let me tell you how I ended up involved in rape and murder. If you believe the world is fair, you will find my story challenging. And if my conclusions seem far-fetched, please forgive me. Experience gives each of us a worldview, and I have mine. I think we learn things as we live. We develop skills, we know facts, we become more self-aware. But I don't think we grow more autonomous, because I don't believe self-autonomy exists. We do not orchestrate who we are, or what we do, or how we live. We do not govern our lives the way we think we do. We are made of the fundamental stuff from which everything is made, the quarks and electrons of physics. And like quarks and electrons, we do what the universe dictates. However, there is one crucial difference. We are self-aware, and this self-awareness is both a curse and a blessing. The blessing is that we experience existence. Most of the universe experiences nothing. But the curse of self-awareness is twofold. We know we will die, and we feel responsible for what we do. I don't fancy the idea of dying, but there is no escaping the fact. However, I do take issue with being held responsible for anything. We feel responsible because we feel autonomous. However, this feeling is misleading. Sure, we can turn our head left or right, choose tea or coffee, and do all sorts of things that appear to be up to us. We make choices all the time. But this is an illusion. According to neuroscience, biology governs our behavior. We are physical beings in a material world. We are not autonomous. I wish I had known this when I was younger. It wouldn't have saved me any pain or hardship, but at least I would have understood why. The universe dictates my every action and my every thought, from my first to my last. Whoa. That's the prologue. I'm not sure if it resonates with anyone here. It happened to resonate with me, and that's why I picked it.
Why did you find this transformational?
The transformation is the fact that I've, as I mentioned earlier, I was reading physics and I'm reading philosophy, and there was sort of I had a cloud of an idea, and this fellow here, by the way, another David, if you can guess it, David Owen is his name. He actually clarified it for me. So I just kept on saying as I read through this, because I'd sort of been physics, philosophy, not really putting the two together, right? And not only did he seem to have a clear view, which would help me clarify, but he also told a great story. So I didn't feel, how sometimes you read a philosophy book and, it's a little bit too dry or not juicy enough or something. This book is sort of exciting. So it had that for me. But the main thing that I'm saying here is the transformation was, I guess it was a gestalt, just a, I can't say it changed my life. I'm still sitting here much as I was before I read the book, but it definitely clarified my worldview, put it that way.
Wonderful. Thank you. I just want to make a general comment about what art can do. We did an entire series on art. I mean, one of the functions of art is that it concretizes philosophy. It actually shows you what the philosophy would mean in life in a very visual, concretized, viscerally, emotionally expressible way. So this is, we went through Ayn Rand's book called Romantic Manifesto, where she looks at art and how kind of different philosophies across time capture that philosophy in art. And what art does is that, see, your philosophy, David talked about the Gestalt, the actual philosophy that is actually ruling your life, a lot of it is implicit. You may not actually explicitly have words for it, but it is there behind you. The power of art is that it brings what is in the ground, what is in the unconscious, and makes it conscious. It moves things from ground to figure. It moves things from the subconscious or unconscious into focal awareness. and you have an experience of your own philosophy, which is a very great, it's a tremendous gift that artists can give you. So thank you very much, David. Really great. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Mike. Joe.
Hi. Yes, I have decided to read from the Enchiridion, and I felt that was one of the more transformative books in my personal life. It was a toss-up between that and Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, but I figure you really can't go wrong with the opening with the Enchiridion. So, of things, some are in our power and others are not. In our power are opinion, movement toward a thing, desire, aversion, turning from a thing, and in a word, whatever are our own acts. Not in our power are the body, property, reputation, offices, magisterial power, and in a word, whatever are not our own acts. And the things in our power are by nature free, not subject to restraint nor hindrance. But the things not in our power are weak, slavish, subject to restraint in the power of others. Remember then that if you think that the things which are by nature slavish to be free, and the things which are in the power of others to be your own, you will be hindered, you will lament, you will be disturbed, you will blame both gods and men. But if you think that what is another's, as it really is, belongs to another, no man will ever compel you, no man will hinder you. You will never blame any man, you will accuse no man, you will do nothing involuntarily against your will, no man will harm you, you will have no enemy, for you will not suffer any harm. If then you desire, aim at such great things, remember that you must not attempt to lay hold of them with a small effect. But you must leave alone some of the things entirely and postpone others for the present. But if you wish for these things also, such great things, and power, office, and wealth, perhaps you will not gain even these very things, power and wealth, because you aim also at those former things, such great things. Certainly you will fail in those things which alone happiness and freedom are secured. Straight away then practice saying to every harsh appearance, you are an appearance, and in no manner what you appear to be. Then examine it by the rules which you possess, and by the first and chiefly, whether it relates to the things which are in our power or to the things which are not in our power. And if it relates to anything which is not in our power, be ready to say, that it does not concern you. And the reason I find this to be so meaningful to me is it really speaks to, for those that are familiar with Stoicism, the dichotomy of control. And that was something that I had learned only a few years ago, but it was life-changing. And so let's go over some of the things that are in our control. It's our opinions, our desires, and our actions. And I want to highlight our actions and some of the things that are outside of our control. Our body, our property, our reputation, and I want to highlight the idea of a reputation being outside of our control. Because there was a time that I felt like I kind of lost my reputation, and I was unfairly maligned, and lost a lot of actual some of the things that would be outside of my control, some of the externals, some of the lost my house and home and things like that. And the thing that I realized, and I was kind of doing some introspection about what went wrong, why, why'd this happen? And I had helped a lot of people with that particular house. And I realized that I didn't regret anything I did because I had my actions. My actions were pure. And so therefore, those could never be taken from me. So when I was really down, I actually recognized the most important thing is that what you do, it's not what you have. And I think that the dichotomy of control really kind of calls this out. So it's not about having possessions. It's about who you are and how you behave. And if somebody tries to actually hurt you, they can't do it because you understand the dichotomy of control. People will try and, if they will try and hurt you with the words, or, hurt you in other ways. And that's what was going on with some of the people that I had been dealing with. And I think that if I had had this knowledge at that particular moment in time, that I would have been fine, because I would have realized what really matters. So the second thing is that it really resonated with me is that it helps you accept things for the way they are. You start to be able to really, once you're able to accept what your reality is, you're less angry, you're less envious, you're achieving a certain degree of tranquility. So that to me is transforming it transformed my entire life. Now that coupled with Marcus Aurelius's meditations, it was a toss-up again, as I mentioned, between these two books, because Marcus Aurelius' meditations really kind of gives you the expectations of people many times over. Expect people to be ignorant, expect people to be mean, expect people to try and do certain things, just have that expectation. But if you marry that with a dichotomy of control, it is a very powerful way of having a philosophy of life, a coherent philosophy of life that allows you to achieve a certain degree of tranquility that people can only think about. I'll leave it at that.
Wow. Thank you, Joe. I think, like Joe, I'm a big fan of Stoicism. And really, for me, Stoicism is just the dichotomy of control. Everything else is detail, because it's like the point of maximum leverage. It starts, it's a very profound idea. The first part of it is acceptance of nature. I think most of us spend a lot of time rebelling against what is, simply just what is. We are putting our wishes, our dreams, our, baseless desires or our habits above nature. So first part of it is just accept what is. And the beauty of it is that first time you hear of it, first time people hear of dichotomy of control, it seems like a passive thing. Okay, because they will, Marcus Aurelius especially, will hit you on the head and say, you can't control that. You think you have wealth, you can't control that. If you think you have family, you might lose it. You think you have health, you might lose it tomorrow. So you can't control many things. So it seems like a negative. It seems like a recipe for passivity. But actually, it is exactly opposite of that. By serenely accepting what is, with that as a ground, you actually discover the point of leverage that you do have, the things that you do control, that you can control. It's like you're in the room and you're banging your head against the wall in order to get out. This is dichotomy of control is about saying, where are the doors and where are the walls? What is it that is given and what is it that is open to you? And it is all about bringing your attention to focus like a laser beam on that, gathering all your courage and acting and doing what you should do on exactly what you can do, and not waste your emotions, your actions on things that you can't control. So it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. And Joe, thanks for bringing that up. Next up is Mike and Jyoti. Mike.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Shrikant, that was a great intro to what I'm feeling right now in the book I want to share with everybody. The book is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And essentially the book is about the artist in all of us and the battle that seems to take place with his enemy, public enemy number one, that he calls resistance, which is the reason why a lot of us as artists never write that symphony, why we don't actually put that painting up, why we don't do a TED talk. And he just pursues the idea of that resistance is real and that it's not going to go away, and that you should know that up front. And that he talks in great detail about how to control it and how to get past it, how to live with it. And I'll read 3 short passages. It's a great read. It's very short, and it's the kind of book you can just pick up and read a chapter. So I'll read you 3 and I'll give you my thoughts in between. The first is resistance is invisible. Resistance cannot be seen, touched, heard, or smelled, but it can be felt. We experience it as an energy field radiating from a work in potential. It's a repelling force. It's negative. Its aim is to shove us away, distract us, prevent us from doing our work. And whenever I read that small chapter, I can actually see myself sitting at my desk prepared to do something. And then I'll say to myself, let's have tea. And I get up and I go to the kitchen. And then when I'm waiting for the tea, I check my iPhone and I get an email from Shrikant and I realize there's some meetup that I want to join, and I respond to the email. And then I have my tea and I completely forgot about what I was supposed to be doing on my desk. So he talks in great detail about that phenomenon. Number 2 is resistance is implacable. Resistance is like the alien or the Terminator or the shark in Jaws. It cannot be reasoned with. It understands nothing but power. It is an engine of destruction programmed from the factory with one object only, to prevent us from doing our work. Resistance is implacable, intractable, indefatigable. Reduce it to a single cell, and that cell will continue to attack. This is resistance nature. It's all it knows. And it's amazing, like sometimes I wake up and I feel like it's almost next to me. I can wake up in a great mood and I still feel sometimes that the obstacles are just right there. And when I look at it deep enough, a lot of times I realize that I'm putting the obstacles there myself. And that I often ask myself, why am I don't want to use the word afraid. I'm not sure that, although it is fear-based, but why is it that the obstacles are constantly there when I know deep in my heart that they really should be back here? I'm not going to deny they exist, but I really should be putting, step ladders in front of me to help me get across something. It's human nature, or at least it's human nature that I deal with on a regular basis. So if any of you feel that you have your own form of resistance that you go through, I highly, highly recommend the book. I'll read the last short paragraph. which is resistance is fueled by fear. And this is actually positive, in my opinion. Resistance has no strength of its own. Every ounce of juice it possesses comes from us. We feed it with power by our fear of it. Master that fear and we conquer resistance. And I think that in closing, coming to a meetup like this and just speaking or presenting in front of people that you don't know is the absolute perfect way to take fear, regardless of how you are with public speaking, or if you're afraid to play a musical instrument or whatever your level of resistance is. It's just, I think anyway, what I got from the book is he keeps forcing you to just get to the point of understanding that it's not personal. He actually says in the book, the fact that you're fearful of something, it's not about you. It's just that you're human, that all of us at some point kind of feel that way about things. And while what I read may have sounded like, oh my goodness, we're fighting this, you can't defeat this enemy. Yes, so what? By the time you finish the book and understand it, it really helps you just kind of put it to the side and get on with things, which I think is important. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. The thinker for me, who actually captures this issue really well from what I have read is Carl Jung. And he talks about shadow. And his principle is that in filth, it'll be found, that you have to go through that resistance. It also connects with ideas of Daniel Kahneman of System 1 and System 2. We are creatures of habit, and we are creatures of comfort. And you have to, in order to do something which is different from what you have been doing, you have to go against your comfort. And that comfort we talked about, Napoleon Hill has this amazing book called Outwitting the Devil. And there he's talking about drifting versus definite purpose. And it's the same issue, that there is this tremendous inertia that we have as beings. We have got large brains, and that large brains, we have all these habits and ways of thinking and all of that. And it wants to continue to do that effortlessly. And in order to do something new, so to go to that next level, you have to go through and past it. And that requires courage. And it's very interesting. It's like most people, when they see that, they shy away from it. Jordan Peterson makes this point beautifully, that when you see something like that, when you see chaos, there is a tendency of people to shy away from it, go. And what you really need to do is to go towards it. And then your entire perspective changes. So so this is a fantastic point. I look forward to reading the book. So folks, go ahead and keep putting all the books that you're recommending in the chat so people can look them up and continue the dialogue. Next up is going to be Jyoti, Donna, Deborah, Christina, Jean, and Anne. Jyoti, go ahead.
Hello all. I'm going to read something from a book written by Dalai Lama and Dr. Cudler, who is a diplomat of the American Society of Psychiatric and Neurology. He went to interview him in Arizona State University as well as in India. And he was, like me, very fascinated with Dalai Lama's unconditional yes, yes, yes. He's always yesing. Before you would ask a question, say yes, because he's not going to disagree with you. So I'm going to read this, and Shrikant, I didn't practice this. I do not know whether I'm going to go 4 minutes or 6 minutes. So stop me and say, okay, Jyoti, you've done your job. Okay. The chapter is about the sources of happiness. He says, 2 years ago, a friend of mine had an unexpected windfall 18 months before the time she had to quit her job as a nurse to go to work for 2 friends who were starting a small healthcare company. The company enjoyed meteoric small success, and within the 18 months, they were bought out by a large conglomerate for a huge sum. Having gotten on ground floor of the company, my friend emerged from the buyout, dripping with stock options, enough to be able to retire at the age of 32. I saw her not long ago and asked how she was enjoying her retirement. Well, she said, it's great being able to travel and do the things that I have always wanted to do. But she added, it's strange. After I got over all the excitement of making all that money, things kind of returned to normal. I mean, things are different. I bought a new house, stuff, but overall, I don't think I'm much happier than I was before. Just around the time that my friend was cashing in on her windfall profits, I had another friend of the same age who found out he was HIV positive. We spoke about how he was dealing with his HIV status. Of course, I was devastated at first, he said. It took me almost a year just to come to terms with the fact that I had the virus. But over the past year, things have changed. I seem to get more out of day each day than I ever did before. And on a moment-to-moment basis, I feel happier than I have been. I just seem appreciative every day. Things move more, and I am grateful that so far I haven't developed any severe AID symptoms, and I really enjoy the things I have. And even though I'd rather not be HIV positive, I have to admit that in some ways it has transformed my life in positive ways. In what ways? I asked. Well, for instance, you know that I have always tended to be a confined materialistic, but conformed materialistic, but over the past years, comes to terms with my mortality has opened up a whole new world. I started exploring spirituality for the first time in my life, reading a lot of books and on the subject and talking to people, discovering so many things that I had never even thought about before. It makes me excited about just getting up in the morning, about seeing what the day will bring. Both these people illustrate the essential point that happiness is determined more by one's state of mind than external events. Success may result in temporary feeling of elation, or tragedy may send us into a period of depression. But sooner or later, our overall level of happiness tends to migrate back to a certain baseline. Psychologists call this process adaptation, and we can see how the principle operates in our everyday life. A pay raise, a new car, or recognition from our peers, that may lift our moods for a while, but we soon return to our customary level of happiness. In the same way, an argument with a friend, a car in the repair shop, or a minor injury may put us in a foul mood, but within a matter of days, our spirits rebound. This tendency isn't limited to trivial everyday events, but persists even under more extreme conditions of triumph or disaster. Researchers surveying Illinois state lottery winners and British pool winners, for instance, found that the initial high eventually wore off and the winners returned to their usual range of moment-to-moment happiness. And other studies have demonstrated that even those who are struck by catastrophic events, such as cancer, blindness, or paralysis, typically recover their normal or near normal level of day-to-day happiness after an appropriate adjustment period. So, if we tend to return to our characteristic baseline level of happiness, no matter what our external conditions are, what determines this baseline? And more important can be a modified set at a higher level. Some researchers have recently argued that an individual's characteristic level of happiness or well-being is genetically determined, at least to some degree. Studies such as one that found that identical twins, that is sharing the same genetic constitution, tend to have very similar levels of well-being, regardless of whether they were raised together or apart. They have led these investigators to postulate a biological set point of happiness wired into their brain at birth. But even if genetics makeup plays a role in happiness, and the verdicts and the verdict is still out on how large that role is. There is a general agreement among psychologists that no matter what level of happiness we are endowed with by nature, there are steps we can take to work with the minor factor to enhance our feelings of happiness. This is because our moment-to-moment happiness is largely determined by our outlook. In fact, whether we are feeling happy or unhappy at any given point often has very little to do with our absolute conditions, but rather it is a function of how we perceive our situation, how satisfied we are with what we have. The comparing mind. What shapes our perception and level of satisfaction? Our feelings of contentment are strongly influenced by our tendency to compare. When we compare our current situation to our past and find that we are better off, we feel happy. This happens, for instance, when our income suddenly jumps from 20,000 to 30,000 a year, but it's not the absolute amount of income that makes us happy, as we soon find out when we get used to our new income and discover that we won't be happy again unless we are making 40,000 a year. We also look around and compare ourselves to others. No matter how much we make, we tend to be dissatisfied with our income if our neighbor is making more. Professional athletes complain bitterly about annual salary of 1 million to 2 million or 3 million, citing the higher salary of a teammate as justification for their unhappiness. This tendency seems to support H.I. Macon's definition of wealthy man, one whose income is $100 a year higher than his wife's sister's husband. So we can see how our feelings of life satisfaction often depend on who we compare ourselves to. Of course, we compare other things besides income. Constant comparison with those who are smarter, more beautiful, and more successful than ourselves also tends to breed envy, frustration, and unhappiness. But we can use the same principle in a positive way. We can increase our feelings of life satisfaction by comparing ourselves to those who are less fortunate than us and by reflecting on all the things we have. Researchers have conducted a number of experiments demonstrating that one's level of life satisfaction can be enhanced simply by shifting one's perspective and contemplating how things could be worse. In one study, women of the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee were shown images of extremely harsh living conditions in Milwaukee at the turn of the century, or were asked to visualize and write about going through personal tragedies such as being burned or disfigured. After completing the exercise, the women were asked to rate the quality of their own lives. The exercise resulted in an increased sense of satisfaction with their lives. In another experiment at the State University of New York at Buffalo, subjects were asked to complete the sentence, "I'm glad I'm not a," fill in the blank. After 5 repetitions of this exercise, the subjects experienced a distinct elevation in their feelings of life satisfaction. Another group of subjects was asked by the experimenters to complete the sentence, "I wish I were a." This time, the experiment left the subjects feeling more dissatisfied with their lives.
Jyoti, how long more?
Yeah, it's quite a bit. So
no, this is good. This is good. You made the basic point.
Yeah.
What did you get from the book?
Okay, I being coming from the Hindu society, Hindu culture, it was always planted in our head. Don't compare yourself or don't compete with others because you will always be unhappy. Look within yourselves what you are capable of producing and having. And instead of saying that I wish I had, that car or that piece of jewelry, you say, but what I have now, I'm very happy with it. So he talks also about the suffering, and I will just give you a very short story about that. The woman was very unhappy that she lost her son, and he told her to go to different homes and ask each one home, have you lost anybody in your house?
Mhm.
If they haven't lost anybody, then you come, then I'll give you another secret.
Right.
But when she went around and she found out everybody had lost somebody or the other. So you should always, not that suffering, you should be content with it. We should always look at it this way. We are not living here forever. And it's sooner or later, everybody's turn comes. Now that I'm left, and this is what I've taken from his preachings, the little time that I'm left with on this earth, what am I going to do for others? And what am I going to do for myself so that I don't have to take the chemicals in my body to live day to day? And that's what he's talking about, inner happiness, that you have to be content within yourself so that you can sail through the obstacles that come in your life.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jyoti. Really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that. I have to tell you anecdote. I was in Amritsar about, I think 2 years ago. Amritsar is at the border of India and Pakistan. It's very close to the border. And it's, the India and Pakistan have been at war for a long time. There is an animosity. There was really, horrendous event of the partition where millions of people died, they were displaced and they died. And I was at a hotel, a Taj Hotel, doing an event. And when I came in, the whole place was full of security. So I said, what is going on? What is going on? I was concerned. And they told me Dalai Lama is coming. So I said, what? Dalai Lama here? Where I am? He said, yeah, he'll be coming in about half an hour. And what I found out was that there is a very holy shrine for Sikhs, which because of partition has been in Pakistan. And that has been cut off for the Sikh for all these years. And this was the first time Pakistan was opening the border to allow pilgrimage to that place. And in order to celebrate that, just like some people chase wars, this gentleman was chasing peace. It's a very big deal to have these two countries, which are enemies, opening this up because there is a human value. And then he showed up I waited like everybody else. There was a number of people waiting there. And he comes in. He's very old. He can barely walk. He was being helped while walking. But his face, which I saw from close, it's like a face of a child, his smile. And he has all this security around him. And then he saw a bunch of children. And he just kept all his security aside and went to the children and held their hands, smiled with them, talked with them. In the middle of everything, the security people were gently trying to get him to move, but he just stood there talking to children and he's, he has that. I mean, the core thing is that he still is a child. He has that genuine appreciation for life, excitement for life, connecting to another human being, which children can match him. Very few adults can match him on that, but children definitely can match him. And it was just a very, very special experience to experience that at close, at like 5 feet, seeing that happen. So thank you very much, Jyoti. That was great. Next up is going to be Donna, followed by Deborah. Donna.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, if you could speak into the mic, it'll be easier for people.
Okay. So I will be reading from Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life.
Wonderful. Donna, can you go ahead and speak more into the mic? You're very soft.
Okay. I believe, is that better? I can increase the volume too.
No, this is good. This is good, Donna.
Okay.
You know what? Go ahead and increase your volume.
Okay. I believe we create every so-called illness in our body. The body, like everything else in life, is a mirror of our inner thoughts and beliefs. The body is always talking to us if we can only take the time to listen. Every cell within your body responds to every single thought you think and every word you speak. Continuous modes of thinking and speaking produce body behavior and postures, and eases or dis-eases. The person who has been permanently scowling did not produce that by having joyous, loving thoughts. Older people's faces and bodies show so clearly a lifetime of thinking patterns. How will you look when you are elderly? Not every mental equivalent is 100% true for everyone. However, it does give us a point of reference to begin our search for the cause of the dis-ease. Many people working in the alternative healing therapies use Heal Your Body all the time with their clients and find that the mental causes run 90 to 95% true. The head represents us. It is what we show the world. It is how we are usually recognized. When something is wrong in the head area, it usually means we feel something is very wrong with us. The ears represent the capacity to hear. When there are problems with the ears, it usually means something is going on you do not want to hear. An earache would indicate that there is anger about what is heard. Earaches are common with children. They often have to listen to stuff going on in the household they really don't want to hear. Household rules often forbid a child's expression of anger, and the child's inability to change things creates an earache. The eyes represent the capacity to see. When there are problems with the eyes, it usually means there is something we do not want to see, either about ourselves or about life, past, present, or future. Whenever I see small children wearing glasses, I know there is stuff going on in their household they do not want to look at. If they can't change the experience, they will diffuse the sight so they don't have to see it so clearly. Many people have had dramatic healing experiences when they have been willing to go back into the past and clean up what it was they did not want to look at a year or two before they began wearing glasses. Are you negating what's happening right now? What don't you want to face? Are you afraid to see the present or the future? If you could see clearly, what would you see that you don't see now? Can you see what you are doing to yourself? The neck and throat are fascinating because so much stuff goes on there. The neck represents the ability to be flexible in our thinking, to see the other side of a question, and to see another person's viewpoint. When there are problems with the neck, it usually means we are being stubborn about our own concept of a situation. Whenever I see a person wearing one of those collars, I know this person is being very self-righteous and stubborn about not seeing the other side of an issue. The throat represents our ability to speak up for ourselves, to ask for what we want, to say, I am. When we have throat problems, it usually means we do not feel we have the right to these things. We feel inadequate to stand up for ourselves. The back represents our support system. Problems with the back usually means we feel we are not being supported. Too often, we think we are only supported by our job or by our family or spouses. In reality, we are totally supported by the universe, by life itself. The upper back has to do with the feeling the lack of emotional support. My husband, wife, lover, friend, boss doesn't understand me or support me. The middle of the back has to do with guilt. All that stuff that is in back of us. Are we afraid to see what is back there? Or are you hiding what is back there? Do you feel stabbed in the back? Do you feel real burnt out? Are your finances in a mess? Or do you worry about them excessively? Then your lower back may be bothering you. The lack of money or the fear of money will do it. The amount you have has nothing to do with it. So many of us feeling that money is the most important thing in our lives and that we could not live without it. This is not true. There is something far more important and precious to us, without which we could not live. What is that? It is our breath. The heart, of course, represents love. While our blood represents joy, our hearts lovingly pump joy throughout our bodies. When we deny ourselves joy and love, the heart shrivels and becomes cold. As a result, the blood gets sluggish and we creep our way to anemia, angina, and heart attacks. The heart does not attack us. We get so caught up in the soap opera, in dramas we create that we often forget to notice the little joys that surround us. We spend years squeezing all the joy out of the heart, and it literally falls over in pain. Heart attack people are never joyous people. If they do not take the time to appreciate the joys of life, they will just recreate another heart attack in time.
Thank you, Donna.
I have one more to
Go ahead.
accidents are no accidents. Like everything else in our lives, recreate them. It's not that we necessarily
Donna, what I recommend is that let us leave it here,
okay.
because we've you walked through the entire body, and this is very powerful place,
Okay.
because I think you've done a very good job of communicating the way in which Louise Hay thinks. It's quite an inspiring story of Louise Hay. Her early life was just horrible, and she kind of transformed it herself through thinking like this. There are many practices which allow you to integrate mind and the body. One of them is, for me, it's Alexander technique, which is a very, very powerful way of doing the posture. And Louise Hay also does a fantastic job of showing kind of the correspondence between the body and the mind. I was talking about Dalai Lama and saying that he looks like a child. That's a very good example. Louise Hay talks about, faces of older people. See, young people, they have not experienced that much. So their face is close to what life is like. As people get older, the way they have thought, the way they have felt, the way their worldview gets etched in their faces, in their bodies. And Louise Hay has a very good way of looking at this correspondence between mind and the body, and it's a fantastic field. So look forward to exploring it further. Thank you very much, Donna. Next up is going to be Deborah, Christina, Jean, Anne, Mark, and Brian. Deborah.
Hi. Okay, so I promise my passage is actually pretty short. So I'm reading the introduction to Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. So the title refers to a photo of Earth taken about, I think it was 3.7 billion miles away at the time by the Voyager 1 spacecraft. And if anybody's familiar with it, they'll know that Earth appeared as a tiny blue dot, hence the name. And I'll elaborate on why I chose the passage after I read it. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Because I know sometimes I have issues with my sound. Yeah? Okay, great. Okay. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel and the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturing, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity and all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit yes, settle not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. And then I actually wrote out notes. Usually I speak extemporaneously, but I'll try to just read this quick. So what I wrote was that I love this passage because it's both humbling and awe-inspiring. I think it emphasizes how small and insignificant we are in the grand scheme of the universe, but how, to me, that means that we as individuals play an outsized role in the lives of those around us. It's up to us to protect and preserve our planet, our home, and it affords us agency. I feel like the passage definitely does that. It gives us a mission and an existence to fight for, our own, those of us around us, those of everything on the planet, really, the planet itself. It represents the beauty of our planet and its ability to sustain life, and it's a kind of improbable scientific miracle of sorts. And I think it allows the reader to have a zoomed out perspective. So far, as Sagan said, Earth is the only planet we know of that definitively supports life. And I feel like it balances the idea of life's trivialities with the wonder of the universe and why we as individuals do matter. As human beings who built the Voyager 1 spacecraft, our ingenuity has led to our creation of technology that has traveled beyond our solar system. I think that's incredible. And hopefully we can appreciate our planet, a place people often take for granted or barely even think about. And I feel like I could just talk for an entire meetup all about the wonders of Carl Sagan, his enthusiastic embrace of science, and how he ignited that scientific curiosity in so many people, but obviously I don't have time now. And finally, this passage was a reflection of my passion for astronomy and my appreciation of life in general. Thanks.
Wow, thank you very much, Deborah. It brings back memories. In 1980s, when I was in Bombay, I did not have a TV at home, and so it was very rare for me to see things of this quality. And the United States Cultural Center in Bombay was actually doing a showing of Carl Sagan's Cosmos. So I would go every week to watch it. The thing that remains after all these years, this is from back in 1980s, early 80s, is just one phrase, which he kept saying again and again, billions and billions. And he said it with so much wonder, so much awe. It was a sense of just the amazing complexity of universe, which he felt and which what was the subject, and it came through. So that has remained with me, and with having that as a background, that as the ground, then when you look at your life, it looks very, very different. And you don't get caught up in minutiae of things, and you're able to kind of look back and look at the grandeur of what this world is like. And that's what Carl Sagan gave me with that documentary. So thank you for bringing that up. Next up is going to be Christina, followed by Jean. Christina.
Okay, I thought I would turn my camera on so it would it's better to focus. Okay, so first, the book I'm going to read is called The Rent Collector. I feel like it's a very popular book, so like a lot of people probably have heard of it or studied it in school. I like this one in particular because of the lesson it provides. So I'll start off with just reading like a couple sentences because I feel like my summary might add a better touch. But it starts off with, to this day, if we look carefully around Stung Menchie, which is the name of the area, if we search for stories that teach truth and goodness, stories with lessons that can soften and change our hearts, we will discover hope. So the thing with this book is like the whole entire story emphasizes on this one woman, and she wants to read and she's very desperate to read. But in Cambodia, there are extreme like parts of poverty, which is like the slums, for example. And they don't have the access to read. So her whole life she spends trying to find the materials to read or just, learning. And she finally gets to learn how to read to teach her son. And when she reads, it's like this beautiful, empowering moment. And it kind of just shows several points. One, like reading is beautiful and like you can grasp a lot from literature. So like sometimes like I meet people and I think it's very interesting, you know what I mean? Like especially like when you get back to reading, because I know like nowadays you meet people and like they'll talk about how much they want to read or like they'll distance themselves away from it. But like reading is truly beautiful and you learn a lot from it. And like that's something that we kind of can take for granted in a way, because in such areas they don't have the tools to read or learn to read. And then two, the other day I was coming from Dunkin' and I had an iced coffee, and I don't know, but I said for like a moment I had my iced coffee and I was just frustrated for a second because it wasn't stirred. So I was like, oh, why didn't I like ask them to stir it for me? And then I realized for a moment, I was like, from all the things to be angry about, or not angry, but frustrated about, there are such issues in the world. And it's really like, it makes you think for a second, like, this is what I'm thinking about. Like I can just stir it myself, like, come on. And, we have to kind of not take everything for granted and just be thankful, because we do live in such an industrial country and we do have access to tools and technology. And there's like I think Jyoti, so I don't know if I think I pronounced it correct, but I know she's mentioned like we gotta just take a moment and just be thankful, and our perspectives and how we see things is really important, and just being happier, so not take things for granted and take everything day by day. But yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Christian, that was great. I want to add one thing. I travel quite a bit, and I've been to India, for example. And you go and look at India, and there are parts of India which are extremely poor. And actually, so first you have actually many different perspectives, because what happens is that, as Jyoti was saying, people think in a comparative way. So their entire perspective on life is based on their neighbors, with what they are with respect to their neighbors. And when you see a data point which is dramatically different, like let's say a kid in an Indian village, or this lady in Cambodia, okay, you quickly see the differences and the similarities. And both of them actually are stunning. In terms of differences, I mean, take, for example, somebody like this lady or this kid in a village in, in Punjab. For them, actually getting their hands on a book is a very big deal. It's a very rare thing. And they prize it tremendously. And here we are in the midst of a sea of books that all of us have access to, but our ability to get things from it is actually quite limited. So in that sense, that kid in India and that lady in Cambodia, because they have the passion for it, they are actually getting a lot more from that. The other thing I want to say is that it's not really about poverty. It is about the spirit. You see children in India, you see people in India who are very poor, but you see the wealth in their soul, their approach to life, which is they're actually happier, more engaged in life, far more than a person who has it easy. So then the question is, who is genuinely poor and who is genuinely rich? Because it's the kind of the internal versus external. And you see that the issues are the same in some ways. And you can see that only when you see these tremendous differences, and then you get to see what is common. to them. So thank you very much, Christina, for bringing that up. Next up is going to be Jean and Mark and Brian. Jean.
Yeah, I'd like to share the book I'm reading, just finished, Flow. And this is one of my favorite book. Actually, I only have 3 in my entire life. And this one of them.
What are the other 2? What are the other 2, Jean?
Actually, the other 2, the first one is I read in college. It's called Jack London's, I always said Brand Adam, but I think it's not Brand Adam. It's some Adam. It made into a movie in Spanish, actually, a couple of years ago. Very good movie. It's about a writer. You know, become a sailor, become a writer. Another one is Road Less Traveled. I read about 10 years ago. It's just very revolutionary. Anyway, this is the third one, I think. So it seems they put everything together, what we learned here, with Jordan Peterson, psychology, Carl Jung, everything seems to come together. I want to read this chapter. There is a consensus among psychologists who study such subjects that people develop their concept of who they are and of what they want to achieve in life according to a sequence of steps. Each man or woman starts with the need to preserve the self, to keep body and its basic goals from disintegrating. At this point, the meaning of life is simple. It's tantamount to survival, comfort, and pleasure. When the safety of the physical self is no longer in doubt, the person may expand the horizon of his or her meaning system to embrace the value of community, the family, the neighborhood, a religion, a religious or ethnic group. This step leads to a greater complexity of the self, even though it usually implies conformity to conventional norms and standards. The next step in development involves reflective individualism. The person again turns inward, finding new grounds for authority and value within the self. He or she is no longer blindly conforming, but develop an autonomy conscience. At this point, the main goal in life becomes the desire for growth, improvement, and actualization of potential. The fourth step, I think this is the step we are in right now, the self-development. The fourth step, which built on all previous ones, is a final turning away from the self, back towards an integration with other people and with universal values. In this final stage, the extremely individualized person, like Sadahar, I don't know who is she, let the river take control of his boat, willingly merge his interests with those of a larger whole. In this scenario, building a complex meaning system seems to involve focused attention alternatively on self and on the other. First, psyche energy is invested in the need of organism, and the psyche order is equivalent to pleasure. When this level is temporarily achieved, and the person can begin to invest attention in the goal of a community, what is meaningful corresponds to group value, religions, patriotism, and acceptance and respect of other people provide the parameter of inner order. The next moment of dialectic bring attention back to self. Having achieved a sense of belonging to a larger human system, the person now feels the challenge of discerning the limit of personal potential. This leads to attempts to self-actualization, to experimentation with different skills, different ideas, and discipline. At this stage, enjoyment rather than pleasure become the main source of rewards. But because this phase involved become a seeker, the person may also encounter a midlife crisis, a career change, and increasingly desperate straining against the limitation of individual capability. From this point on, the person is ready for the last shift in the redirection of energy, having rediscovered that one can, and more important, cannot do alone. The ultimate goal merge with system larger than the person, a cause, an idea, a transcendental entity. Not everyone moves through the stage of this spiral of ascending complexity. A few never have the opportunity to go beyond the first step. When survival demands are so insistent that a person cannot devote much attention to anything else, he or she will not have enough psychic energy left to invest in the goal of the family or wider community. Self-interest alone will give meaning to life. The majority of people are probably ensconced comfortably in the second stage of development, where the welfare of the family or the company, the community, or the nation are the source of meaning. Many fewer reach the third level of reflective individualism, and only a precious few emerge once again to force a unity with universal value. So this stage do not necessarily reflect what does happen or what will happen. They characterize what can happen if a person is lucky and succeed in controlling consciousness. Anyway, so I think this part is really inspiring. I think, I think we are, a lot of people here, I think we are in the third stage, and hopefully we can move to the fourth stage to become a community, to create something bigger for the whole society. Anyway, this book is so good. I highly recommend anybody to read it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jean. And the reference in the middle was Siddhartha, which is the name of Buddha. So the thing that was unique about what he was referring to there is that, Buddha kind of went for enlightenment, but then the tradition there are many people in India who, once they achieve enlightenment, they just continue in it. But the thing that Buddha did was that he came back to the people to offer the enlightenment. So that reflective individualism, of reflective, that the third stage, that kind of is coming back and offering the universal version of that to people at large. And this is, the core concept of this book is really amazing. It's a very powerful concept. And we have talked about it in multiple forms with Jordan Peterson and other people. It's a question of being at the edge of order and chaos. It is at kind of matching what you're doing to your skills. So that you are always at you can stretch and achieve it, so that you are not bored by what you're doing because it is already within your ability, and you are not completely at sea and anxious because it is way beyond your capacity. It is to achieve the optimal level of challenge, or what Jordan Peterson would call meaning, in skating at the edge of order and chaos, accepting as much chaos as you can possibly handle and still remain rooted. So that's what the book, the flow is about. So thank you very much. Jean, next up is going to be, it's going to be Anne, Mark, and Brian. Anne.
Hi. My excerpts are from a work of fiction, my favorite work of fiction. I hope that's okay. The Great Gatsby by F.
Sure.
Scott Fitzgerald. I hope everyone generally knows the storyline, but I don't think that's necessary to know with regard to these excerpts. The reason I like it is because it speaks to all of our capacity to constantly reinvent ourselves and to pursue our dreams. That's sort of what Gatsby represents, at least to me. And so the first,
what I'm going to do is that when you are up to about 4.5 minutes, I will let you know. Okay.
Yeah, I don't even think I'll get to 4.5 minutes.
Go ahead.
It kind of interrupted my train of thought there. Okay, the first excerpt is, the truth was that, this is from about the middle of the book. The truth was that J. Gatsby of West Egg, Long Island, sprang from his Platonic conception of himself. He was a son of God, a phrase which, if it means anything, means just that. And he must be about his father's business. the service of a vast, vulgar, and meretricious beauty. So he invented just the sort of J. Gatsby that a 17-year-old boy would be likely to invent, and to this conception, he was faithful to the end. I love that phrase, the service of a vast, vulgar, and meretricious beauty, which is sort of the world in a lot of respects. As you know, J. Gatsby, if you know the story, he had reinvented himself from being poor to being rich. He moves to Long Island. He moves to Long Island to be near to the love of his life, Daisy. And of course, the story is that doesn't quite work out, but I won't go into spoiler alert if you haven't read the book. The second excerpt, the second one I'm going to do is at the very end of the book. The storyline, the narrative has basically played itself out. Gatsby is no longer in the story. And this last voice is the voice of his neighbor, Nick Carraway, a young man who was about the same age as Gatsby, who had been his neighbor to this fantastic big house that Gatsby had, where he'd had all these fabulous parties. And the house is now closed down, and the story is over. And so these are Nick's last thoughts. On the last night, with my trunk packed and my car sold to the grocer, I went over and looked at that huge, incoherent failure of a house once more. On the white steps, an obscene word scrawled by some boy with a piece of brick stood out clearly in the moonlight, and I erased it, drawing my shoe raspingly along the stone. Then I wandered down to the beach and sprawled out on the sand. Most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy moving glow of a ferry boat across the sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of the old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the new world. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. And as I sat there brooding in the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms further, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Like I said, for me, Gatsby represents dreaming and reinventing yourself. And also, I'm consistently inspired that someone, F. Scott Fitzgerald, could write beautiful, beautiful prose like that, which is as much poetry as prose, and to conceive of a rather, garden variety romance narrative into a beautiful work of art that I think for all of us here in America makes us think about what is the dream of America.
Wow, beautifully put, and really appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, that's the power of, because what it does is that it just shows you what does it mean to wonder. It's and you not just in a kind of intellectual way, but describing the experience of it. along with all the concretes, the feelings about it, the thoughts about it, in this kind of rich thing that you can contemplate. So amazing. Thank you.
Welcome.
Next up is going to be Mark, followed by Brian. Mark.
Thanks, Shrikant. Well, I was taking a slightly different tack, and I was thinking about some of the things I'd read over the years that I'd found somewhat inspirational. And a lot of the ideas and concepts I've read over the years never really was all in one book. I don't tend to remember which book I got it from, so I can never give credit to anybody. So with that background, I just wanted to mention a couple of things before I read from one particular item. There was a book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by a gymnast called Dan Millman that I read when I was much younger than I am now. That was my introduction to mindfulness. It's light, it's fictional, but I wanted to suggest that to people. Some people may have heard of it if they're old enough. Anything by Bertrand Russell, that definitely formed a lot of my opinions. The philosophy, the politics, the humor, I recommend him to anybody too. And then I wanted to make one other point that I know we're talking about books, but I wanted to remind people that we can gain inspiration from things other than books. I mentioned this because I was strongly affected by a TV series called Kung Fu. Again, going way, way back in time, Kwai Chang Caine, as it was supposed to be a Bruce Lee vehicle, but they gave it to a white guy. That had a lot of great Taoist and Buddhist concepts embedded in it. I think it's one of the most philosophical TV shows there's ever been. I encourage everybody to take a look at it if you can get it. It's David Carradine was the actor in it, by the way. And then more recently, a fun introduction to philosophy is The Good Place. That's available on Netflix right now. So that's the end of my shameless plugging. So some people have heard me talk about Thich Nhat Hanh, the Cambodian Buddhist monk. So I'm going to do a very short reading from his book, The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching. Okay. In 1968, I was in India with Samdech Mahachasanda, a leader of the Cambodian Buddhism, and Sister Khan Hong, my dear student, friend, and colleague. For several days, we sat together on Vulture Peak until sunset, and I realized that in former times, the Buddha had looked at the same setting sun with the same eyes. Afterwards, we walked down the mountain slowly and mindfully, not saying a word, and since that day, I have continued to walk in the same way. Vulture Peak is beautiful, and Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, North and South America are also beautiful. When there is mist on the mountains, it is beautiful. And when there is no mist, it is also beautiful. All four seasons are beautiful. You are beautiful and your friends are beautiful. There is nothing to stop you from being in touch with life in the present moment. The question is, do you have eyes that can see the sunset, feet that can touch the earth? If the Buddha were to transmit his eyes to you, would you know how to use them? Don't think that happiness will be possible only when conditions around you become perfect. Happiness lies in your own heart. You only need to practice mindful breathing for a few seconds and you'll be happy right away. Confucius said, "What greater joy can there be than putting into practice what you have learned?" Sometimes we feel as though we are drowning in the ocean of suffering, carrying the burden of all social injustice of all times. The Buddha said, when a wise person suffers, she asks herself, what can I do to be free from this suffering? Who can help me? What have I done to free myself from this suffering? But when a foolish person suffers, she asks herself, who has wronged me? How can I show others that I am the victim of wrongdoing? How can I punish those who have caused my suffering? Why is it that others who have been exposed to the same conditions do not seem to suffer as much as we do? You might like to write down the first set of questions and read them every time you are caught in your own suffering. Of course, you have the right to suffer, but as a practitioner, you do not have the right not to practice. We all need to be understood and loved, but the practice is not merely to expect understanding and love. It is to practice understanding and love. Please don't complain when no one seems to love or understand you. Make the effort to understand and love them better. If someone has betrayed you, ask why. If you feel that the responsibility lies entirely with them, look more deeply. Perhaps you have watered the seed of betrayal in her. Perhaps you have lived in a way that has encouraged her to withdraw. We are all co-responsible, and if you hold on to the attitude of blame, the situation will only get worse. If you can learn how to water the seed of loyalty in her, that seed may flower again. Look deeply into the nature of your suffering so you will know what to do and what not to do to restore the relationship. Apply your mindfulness, concentration, and insight, and you will know what nourishes you and what nourishes her. Practice the first noble truth, identifying your suffering. The second noble truth, seeing its sources. And the third and fourth noble truths, finding ways to transform your suffering and realize peace. The four noble truths and the noble eightfold path are not theories. They are ways of action. Right. And just briefly, the reason I chose that was that particular focus on the attitude to suffering. I think we can all see examples, maybe in ourselves, but definitely in society around us, where there's that looking to blame the other rather than take action back for yourself to improve your situation. Like looking to blame, thinking of yourself as a victim is, to me, is very disempowering. We've touched upon this topic before. That passage spoke to me many times over the years, so I wanted to share that with you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mark. And following Mark's example of shameless plugging, I want to talk about, firstly, a meetup that we are doing on Tuesday. On the topic is Be Like Water. So that is, we're trying to look at Taoism. We're going to look at Bruce Lee's thinking on it. And we're going to have Kevin and Jean talk for about, give their take on Taoism. And so don't miss that. And secondly, Mark will be back 4 weeks from today on May 28th to talk about mindfulness for the full meetup. So don't miss that either. Thank you, Mark. Next up is going to be Brian.
Hi. Okay, first of all, I'd just like to echo the plug from Mark about the good life. I also want to mention, I just received it today, I've not looked at it, but there's now a book called Philosophy in the Good Life, which I look forward to reading. When I first started preparing for this session, I chose a very mechanical subject, and it's from a book that I've had for a long time now, which it's called The Brain Book by Peter Russell. And it goes through the workings of the brain, how memory works, and it gives you examples of how you can improve that. It was also my introduction to mind mapping. That's where I learned mind mapping from. It is now quite old. It was published in 1979. So although it's still very good, and as far as I'm concerned, still very relevant, I decided to skip that one for now because there's another book which is probably more interesting. I'd like to read 3 paragraphs out of it. I studied Stoicism for about a couple of years now, and I was very fascinated by the improvement opportunities from there. One thing which struck me from the beginning was the phrase they use, which is memento mori, to remember you're going to die. And although the paragraphs I'm going to read from are not from a book about Stoicism, they do cover that area. So I'll just read 3 short paragraphs. There is no need to be afraid of death. It is not the end of the physical body that should worry us. Rather, our concern must be to live while we're alive, to release our inner selves from the spiritual death that comes with living behind a facade designed to conform to external definitions of who and what we are. Every individual human being born on this earth has the capacity to become a unique and special person, unlike any who has ever existed before or will ever exist again. But to the extent that we become captives of culturally defined role expectations and behaviors, stereotypes, not ourselves. We block our capacity for self-actualization. We interfere with our becoming all that we can be. Death is the key to the door of life. It is through accepting the finiteness of our individual existences that we are enabled to find the strength and courage to reject these intrinsic roles and expectations and to devote each day of our lives, however long they may be, to growing as fully as we are able. We must learn to draw on our inner resources to define ourselves in terms of the feedback we receive from our own internal valuing system, rather than trying to fit ourselves into some ill-fitting stereotyped role. It is the denial of death that is partially responsible for people living empty, purposeless lives. For when you live as you live forever, it becomes too easy to postpone the things you know that you must do. You live your life in preparation for tomorrow or in remembrance of yesterday, and meanwhile, each today is lost. In contrast, when you fully understand that each day you awaken could be the last you have, you take the time that day to grow, to become more of who you really are, to reach out to other human beings. And that was from a book by a doctor who I've read many of her books. Her name is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and the title of the book is Death, the Final Stage of Growth. That's it.
Thank you, Brian. Wonderful. So, folks, now we have just a few minutes left. So let's talk about what you got from this meetup. Anything that remains with you, and you can do that very briefly, less than a minute or so per person. What are you walking away with? So go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to share what your takeaways are from this meetup. What are you walking away with? If you'd like to share, just go ahead and type exclamation mark. Okay, so it's going to be Joe followed by Judith. Joe, what did you get from the meetup?
I mean, I thought everybody read beautifully, and I really thought that it was a excellent meetup. I took a little bit from everybody, but I think Deborah's comments with pale blue dot, if I'm saying it correctly, the idea of feeling the insignificance within the grand scheme of the universe. I often feel like insignificance in grand scheme of nature. But that often gives me a better perspective, is that when I take that, when I look at it from from a Stoic point of view, the view from above as well kind of fits into that narrative. So that's something that I took away. I also really liked what Mark shared. I thought it was really the Eightfold Path and everything, and the way you integrated it, and that was meaningful. But I know that everybody here shared something special to them, and everybody did have something to offer. So I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm I very much like what Brian shared just now as well, and Dave, what you shared was very powerful as well, and meaningful to yourself. So anyway,
wonderful. Thank you. I completely agree. I think just this, people talking about something that they cared about and actually reading it out. I think I think this format is very, very good. It allows for kind of more substantial sharing of thoughts, because you're doing kind of selectiveness, you're explaining why, and then you're actually putting the thing that you're talking about on the table. So I think it works beautifully. Next up is going to be Judith, followed by Dave. Judith.
I enjoyed hearing
all the different ideas people, like what's important to them. And I find that personal stories or seeing individual lives and how people live is really powerful, like as a way of learning things, sometimes not just from books. Shrikant, I wanted to ask you, can I have 1 minute to share what is not a book, but is...
Please do, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So I was watching two series recently, and they're both on Netflix. One is called My Love. And can you hear me? Yeah, okay, 'cause I'm on low power. Okay. One is called My Love, and it's travels through the world, Vermont and Spain and Korea and Japan and India and Brazil, if I've covered them all. And it covers elderly people at the couples at the end of their lives, after they've lived very long lives, and they still have very strong relationships, and it just shows that part of their lives as they look toward the end. And it's just interesting because we don't always have, not all of us have people in our lives that are examples like that. Sometimes we live, apart. The culture is very segregated in many ways, and you don't sometimes have that extended community. So it was really good to see, plus that it went to different cultures, and so from different points of view, but all old people. So how they all, farming people, different people, and they don't read books necessarily. They could be poor all their lives, but they have wisdom. And then the other show is just these 30-minute, the theme is just clothing, but that's just what ties it together. But it's just different people and the way they view their lives and the challenges they had with the theme of clothing. I really can't get it any more than that, but there are samples of stories of how people overcome different obstacles in their lives, or not, just their attitude toward life. It's such varying and diverse ideas. So I found that really powerful recently, and it's kind of like a self-help book in a way.
Wonderful.
So thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Next up is going to be Dave, followed by Jean. Dave, what did you get from the meetup?
Shrikant, this is a wonderful evening. I think of the term individuation, that we are all individuals and we see the world from different perspectives. And it was so interesting to see what people have resonated, what their favorite things are. Some things old, some things new, some things fiction, some things nonfiction. It's been a quite interesting evening. Some people want to share and some people want to just listen. But thank you very much for another great meetup.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. Next up is going to be Jean.
Yeah, this is quite interesting because I think when we pick book, we have our own preference. For example, I don't like to read book about death, but when I heard Brian reading that, that's kind of quite interesting. And also, I like Great Gatsby. I haven't read novels for a long time. Somehow I no longer can read novel anymore. So, and interesting about the Dalai Lama, I read that book too. And the chapter actually Jody was reading leave me the most impression of that book. And I found in Flow, they exactly talk the same thing about people when they lose physical capacity in some form, actually they end up become positive experience, because before that, they didn't focus their energy into one thing. Now they have obstacle, they actually become more meaningful their life. So I think maybe the survival kind of like trigger energy type of thing, but they have more purpose. They become more purposeful and more meaningful, find more flow actually. So it's very similar to what Dalai Lama was describing. So it's quite fascinating, the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. Next up is Jyoti, followed by Deborah. Jyoti.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what I thought each one of them said because everybody did a great job. What I'm going to say is that I am so elated that I'm not alone anymore, because all these years I read these books by myself, sitting in some nook, reading those books, inspiring myself, and not having anybody to share with. So I was in a book club, fiction book club, that was different, but this is different. So I really appreciate that everybody came out and made me feel like I have company. So this is really great. I really appreciate each one of you over here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Deborah.
Yeah, so I guess like other people said, I feel like I gained a greater understanding of the people here. And I always look forward to people's takeaways. And I feel like this was kind of an expanded version of that, but we had a little more autonomy over choosing what we would talk about. And I just really wanted to applaud everyone who did share, because I know I don't really have a fear of public speaking, but when I was waiting, I felt like I started to get nervous. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if other people felt nervous too, but I feel like it's a brave thing. You're sharing a part of yourself and you're opening yourself up potentially to criticism. Everybody's always very nice, but yeah, so I think that's awesome. So thank you, I guess, for giving us a peek into like who you are. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So folks, I want to tell you about a special meetup coming up this Sunday. There is a book, one of my favorite books. It's called Art of Learning by Josh Waitskin. He was a chess prodigy who won 8 US championships, and then became famous because he was the star of a movie called Searching for Bobby Fischer, which is a fantastic movie, by the way. And after the movie came out, he was just 16 at that time. And suddenly his life changed because he got fame and he actually loved chess. And it was a personal discipline a personal quest for him to explore the game and learn. And suddenly he kind of started seeing himself from outside. And that basically, it didn't kill his love for chess. He says he got separated from his love of chess. And so he left chess and then went and started doing Tai Chi at one of the studios right a couple of blocks from my place here in New York, and went on to become a champion Tai Chi push hands competitor with world championships and things like that for many times. And what he does is actually talks about learning. How do you learn? And he takes principles from chess, which is a cerebral discipline, and martial arts, which is very different, and shows principles across. And we're going to do it in a very interesting way. So I and Mike, who's just been here for 2 meetups, but he's a great guy. He's taught chess. He's very familiar with Taoism. So what we are going to do is that we are going to do an improv version of a presentation. So Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about Art of Learning and Josh Waitskin?
Yeah, it's kind of all surreal for me. I think this is my 3rd meeting with all of you. And Deborah, I second your comment. You made it very personal tonight. The fact that listening to everybody respond to all the presentations, which were all great. So for me personally, it's just kind of surreal that I fell into the group and I'm listening, and then Shrikant reached out and brought up The Art of Learning, which is one of my favorite books. I probably would have read from it tonight had it not been coming up this Sunday. But the book is fantastic, and in that he faces a couple of issues that people go through, especially parents. If you think about raising a kid, for example, if you have a young kid, do you expose your child to competition? And if so, how much? And then as that child starts to perform, as they reach new levels, you have to be careful that as they're doing that, is it the parent's ego that's kind of propelling that kid? Or is it the kid's love for the art of the game? And then the conflict that happens when the two don't connect. If you add a coach into that, now you have a triangle. You have a parent, you have the player or the student, and a coach. And if they're not in harmony, things begin to break down. And Josh talks a great deal about that in the book, about how he had a different coach that didn't fit his style, and then how he came across the Tao Te Ching haphazardly. And it helped him bridge his transition from being a very, very competitive chess player. I mean, he was just fantastic into push hands Tai Chi. and started, I want to say he was in his late 20s, and he actually won a world championship from zero. He goes into, I don't know if they call it a dojo, I don't know what it's called there. And he goes from zero, from the beginner's mind, which he talks a great deal about in the book, to becoming a world champion. And then how he flows between the love of the game or the sport and then actually having to win, being a competitor, and then also someone who loves his endeavor. It's awesome. It's just a fantastic book.
And what we're going to do is I'm trying out a very interesting format here. Okay, so firstly, I put, if you go to, this is going to be at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. Okay, I put a video, short video of Josh talking about the book. It's only 10 minutes, so you get a flavor of it. And then I've given 2 links to very detailed book notes. One of them takes about 20 minutes to read. One of them takes about 40 minutes to read. These are very good encapsulations, chapter by chapter encapsulations of the principles that you learn in each of the chapters. Okay. And what Mike and I are going to do is that we're going to do an improv show based on that. Okay. We're going to go chapter by chapter. One of us will start, and we will, we'll talk for a couple of minutes about what we got from that chapter. And then the other person will chime in for that. We'll do a very quick interaction and then go to the next one. So that's, I want to see that kind of a format. We're not going to prepare anything. We're not going to discuss with each other what we are going to talk about. Actually, it works pretty well. I've been doing this for the Louis Sullivan. I wanted to say Louis Sullivan show now, but no, Louis Sullivan meetups on Saturdays at 2:30 p.m. I've got 5 incredible presenters, and each of them come at it in their own way. So what it does is that it allows kind of independent voice and independent takes on each of the pieces, plus you get a little bit of interaction. And then we're going to do it interactively. So that's what is coming up, folks, on Sunday at 2:30. So don't miss it. And then I'm really interested in, Dadi Jing. Dadi Jing, it's been profound. Okay, it's a very powerful book. It's a very short book. It's basically, the way I think about it is 81 poems, 81 short poems. And my favorite translation of it is by Ursula Le Guin, because she's a science fiction writer. So she has a very good flair for the poetic quality. And she has managed to, so it actually sings. In English, it sings. So it's not just like a word-for-word translation or a literal translation. And she grew up with it as, listening to it, reading it, because her father was into it right from her childhood. So that's kind of part of her. And so it's a very beautiful translation. So if you want, I don't know anything about this. My knowledge is terrible. Okay. And I'm just trying to kind of, see what it is. And so I'm getting people who know better than me to come and help me learn. Okay. That's what these meetups are about. I'm trying to learn. I take things which focus on things which I'm trying to learn. And then people come and they add their own takes. Both people who know better than me or people who know less than me, who can ask questions that can really open up my eyes or anybody else's eyes of saying, oh, really? What is that? So it's going to be 2 meetups. So one on Sunday at 2:30, and then on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, where we're going to talk about, Be Like Water. So don't miss that. And hopefully at some point we'll go to the core. I'm starting slowly, kind of going at the edges in a much more kind of accessible way for people. But it is something really powerful to explore, because Chinese thought is very different from Western thought, just like Indian. So Chinese thought and Indian thought and Western thought are very different from each other. And it is very hard to develop a sense of what that thought is like. Okay, so you have to be very patient with yourself. Don't jump to conclusions, and try to formulate what you're trying to learn in terms that you know, because you're probably going to be wrong. about that. You kind of have to experience it slowly and try to see what it can. That's what I'm trying to do. So I invite you to do the same. You can read up anything that you want. I would recommend, there is actually a YouTube reading of Ursula Le Guin's translation that you can do. It's only like less than an hour. I can read the entire book in about an hour and a half, and I've read it about 3 times now, and I'm doing notes. So I look forward to having you join in this exploration of the Tao. All right. So thank you very much, folks. See you soon. Bye.